Okay, so in the last video, we went over rhombus, rectangle, and the special features of those. Then I got cut off on time, and we have to continue squares on the next video. Remember, when you have a square, it is formed from a rhombus and a rectangle. So a square has a whole lot of special properties because it has everything that a rhombus has, everything that a rectangle has, and everything that a parallelogram has. So let's go back and recall the definition of a square, and then look at how we can use this to find specific things inside of a square. So the definition of a square, it is a regular quadrilateral. Well, remember what a regular quadrilateral means. It is equilateral and equiangular, which means all the sides are the same and all of the angles are right angles. It is both a rhombus and a rectangle, and it is a parallelogram. So we've got lots of information that we can put into a square. Okay, let's look at how we can apply our rules to the properties to find information on a square. Okay, if we know AC is 10, that's this whole diagonal. Well, let's think through all the things we know about a square. We know diagonals are congruent and bisected. That tells me that's 5, 5, 5, and 5, because that's a feature of a rectangle, and a square has every property of a rectangle. I also know opposite angles are congruent and bisected, but think about what each of those angles is. It's a rectangle, because remember, a square is a rectangle. That means all of these angles are 90 degrees, and they're all bisected. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 congruent angles. So and every one of those is 90 degrees. Well, if you divide 90 degrees in half, it's going to give you 45 degrees. That means every one of these is 45 degrees. Okay, what else do we know about our picture? Well, it's a rhombus. So we know that the diagonals are perpendicular to each other, which means this is a right triangle. And the way I could find my side length is use the Pythagorean theorem to find one of the sides. So each of the legs are 5. Okay, I realize I used x, and we've got x there. We're not talking about the same x. So you've got 25 plus 25 take the square root of 50. Now, this is one of those situations where I'm going to be looking for simplest radical form for your answer. What's perfect in 50? 25 times 2. The square root of 25 is 5, so I'm going to get 5 root 2 as my side length. But it's a rhombus, which means every single one of those side lengths is 5 root 2. So just remember that when you're looking at a square, you've got to put all of those properties of a rhombus, rectangle, parallelogram together to see what you can use of those properties to find a missing piece in the square. So let's fill in our flowchart again. We're going to have to do this a lot, and it will help you with your sometimes, always, never problems. So at the top, this is just the parallelogram side of the flowchart. A parallelogram. Underneath that, a rhombus and a rectangle. When you put those together, you get a square. So why don't you pause these and see if you can answer these questions and then come back and check it. So pause the video, do these problems, and then check. A parallelogram is a rectangle. Remember I talked about if the name is underneath, then it's going to be sometimes, because think about it, a parallelogram could be a rectangle, but it could be a rhombus. So that's going to be sometimes. And then a square is a rhombus. Well, if you are a name underneath, then it's going to be always. A square is always a rhombus. It's also always a rectangle. It's part of the definition of a square. A rhombus is equiangular. Well, I know definition of rhombus is that it is equilateral. Equiangular is a rectangle, but when is a rhombus a rectangle? When it makes a square. So we're going to say sometimes. So it's when when a rhombus is a square, that's when it's equiangular. A rectangle has opposite sides parallel. That is a feature of a parallelogram. So essentially what this question is asking is, when is a rectangle a parallelogram? Well, that's always, because that is, again, part of what a rectangle is. A parallelogram is equilateral. This is essentially saying a parallelogram is a rhombus. Well, we know that sometimes, because it could also be a rectangle. Okay, so you're going to have practice to do in class tomorrow. If in class tomorrow you want to bring your headphones and pull up the video again and watch it again just to reinforce it, you are welcome to. On Friday in class, you're going to have Miss Long in class, and she is a previous geometry teacher. She can answer any questions you have on these properties and on your practice. You're going to do practice Thursday and Friday in class, and I will return on Tuesday, and then we will have a quiz on Thursday, I believe. I need to double check the unit plan, but you can check the unit plan online to see when your next quiz is. So good luck, and I will see you guys when I return from my conference.